thanks for tuning in. So today I thought I will share with you a little bit more information about audio branding for podcasting. So this is something I do, and I've been doing it now for a number of years. In fact, I've just checked today how many cases I've worked with since we started to offer the audio branding packages, and I have done, on the record, because I haven't recorded all of them here, but on the record I have just over 250 different cases. So it's quite a lot of work. And I'm being more and more busy with those. But effectively, what is audio branding and why should you do that for your own podcast? So I'm going to give you a little bit more information perhaps that will help you get your audio branding up to scratch if you have a podcast. So there are a couple of things I go through. So at Music Radio Creative, we offer the full audio branding package. This is where somebody can come in and say, well, guys, I've got a podcast. I just want it to sound great. And I want you to figure out what sort of intro, outro I should have, what kind of music, what kind of voice artist I should use, etc. So this is what I do. Those audio branding cases land with me at the moment. I am training other team members to help me with those as we become more and more busy. But they are my baby, so to speak. So I really look forward to every single one of them when they come in, and I really enjoy working on them. So the very first thing that you need to do if you wanted to conduct your own audio branding and create what we call a branding concept. So the concept should really include the tagline. So if you don't have a tagline, you could have one. It's not a compulsory, but I think it's kind of a nice thing to have. You also should include your scripts for intro, for outro, as well as any segments within the podcast that you would like to brand. Also include in there things such as your YouTube channel. If you have a YouTube channel, you want to make sure to brand it too, and you want that sound to be uniform across all the channels, so you want to make sure to include it on your YouTube channel as well. So you want any segments in there, and you also want, of course, an outro. Then the things you should consider are things such as what kind of music to use and which voice artist will deliver the message the best. You also should have a think about, do you want any talk over music added to the intro or outro? What format? Well, what format would be best for you for those elements to be in, so that when you mix it in with the podcast, it kind of works uniformly. But I will cover all of those elements as we go along. So the very first thing is the tagline. I do like to work on those as the very first thing, really, because then the tagline can be implemented in other elements, such as your intro, such as your generic segment breaks and things like that. So the tagline should really be very much a one sentence summary of what the whole idea behind the podcast is. Do invest some time to think it through. What really helps is getting this perfect avatar and kind of goal in mind as to what you want your listener to take away from listening to your podcast. There is no wrong or right in here. Just jot down a lot of different ideas and kind of see what sticks. You will be able to read through them and think whether this is something that really works or doesn't, and whether it needs some improvement or tweaking. So I like to implement the tagline in the intro. I think it is quite important. If you have one, as I say, it's not compulsory to have one. And in some podcasts, it's quite hard to come up with a good tagline, especially if the focus is not so targeted, not so focused, not so laser focused. Some podcasts like to be very kind of wide open when it comes to different topics, which is fine, and taglines just don't always work. So don't get stuck on that one first thing if you can't come up with a good one. That's absolutely fine. So coming up with the rest of the script, so intro, outro, and the segments, there are some questions I ask when we conduct branding here at Music Radio Creative, and I will run you through those questions so that perhaps you can have your own branding created on the back of that. So the first question we ask is, of course, things such as podcast name and the podcaster name, if you want to include that. Things that are worth to think about is if you want to introduce the host, so yourself, sometimes it's quite nice to add credibility. So when you say, and here is your host, I don't know, somebody like, experienced real estate investor with 20 years of portfolio backing, whatever it is, kind of make it sound impressive, make it sound big, give your best kind of description you can. So if you have something that is worth to mention it. If you haven't, don't mention it. It's just simply, there is, again, no right or wrong in here. You just have to make it sound good if you have something to add on to that. Then, have a think as to what is the podcast going to be about. It's kind of a brief summary, so to speak, of what the podcast is going to be. I quite often receive answers here like, well, I'm not quite sure yet. I will see how it goes, but in general, it will be this, that, and another. Well, that's not good enough. You have to really think about it. It's like, what kind of content are you going to put in there? How are you going to encourage the listener to come back? That's the important element that is really crucial to implement in your intro and outro. Another question we ask is there any specific call to action that you would like your listeners to take? And usually think of just one. So don't try to make it a long list of items that your potential listener should or could do. Think of the most important action they could take. If there is one. If there isn't, it's fine. We can leave it generic, and I will cover that later as well. And another things, is there anything that should be included in the scripts? So quite often, if you cover any topics that are regulated, this could be relevant to people who cover health-related podcasts, legal issues. You want to have some sort of disclaimer that says that, well, this is not official advice, that you should still seek professional opinion, advice, etc. So if you are in some way regulated, you have to make sure to include that in your branding, because that will kind of keep your back safe. So you want to make sure it's there. Then another things, is there anything you would like to have included? So rather than you should have included, is there anything you would like to have included? Are there any kind of catchphrases that you've already thought of and would like to make sure to put them on? That's a good place to also jot it down. Talk over music, I've already covered. Worth to also put through description of your podcast as to, from start to finish, how is the structure of it going to work? This is going to help you with putting together any segment jingles or transition jingles, because you will know where you are going to need them. And if you are going to need them, it might be that you won't need them at all. So, step by step, how is the whole audio going to run from start to finish? Do you have any social media you want to mention? Just a note, by the way, on social media, I personally don't recommend putting any social media links in your intro and outro for a number of reasons, but the main one is you haven't got any control over those platforms and websites. So in the future, things may change. You could maybe move your focus from one platform to another. It's just a little bit too risky, in my opinion. And also, you have absolutely no way to measure whether people actually go there or not. So steer clear if you can. Is there any style of music you think would work well? Now, with music, you have to be very cautious. It's very easy to try and get the music that you like personally, but instead have a think as to what kind of feelings you would like to induce with your episode, how you would like people to feel. Music quite often can help you visualize things as well. So, it's like you are instantly transported into something specific. So steer clear from your personal preferences. If you are a heavy metal fan and you've got a podcast about motherhood, well, they could actually go well together, but maybe not always. So try to keep it kind of to choosing the music that will best represent the topic you are trying to deliver and your personal energy. So this is also important. As you know, I've worked with podcasters in the past where they had, seemingly very kind of upbeat and positive podcast, but the way they were delivering the message was very very chilled, very relaxed. So putting kind of, heavy beat music was just not right because it would clash. So have a think about those two things when selecting the right music. Preference of the voice artist. So again, I'm quite often asked, so is there any rule if I'm a male podcaster, should I have a female person on the intro or outro? Well, there is and there isn't. So have a think about who is your target audience. Are those going to be men or women? What age are they going to be? What kind of voice is going to speak best to them? So you could be a man who targets a male-specific audience. Well, then in that case, I would say it's probably still a male you should use as a voice. A female may not be best suited for the target audience you are essentially trying to reach. So again, there is a rule, but there isn't, in the sense that you should really treat it on an individual basis instead of trying to apply one rule to every single type of podcast. It's simply because there are so many different niches in podcasting. It's impossible to say, yes, that's the rule, go with that. I really am a big fan of simply deciding that based on individual podcaster, as well as a topic and the way the message is delivered. So that's kind of crucial elements in there. Then the other thing we ask about is if you have existing tagline or slogans. Quite often that is the case. And is there any additional information that could kind of, is relevant in here? So have a think. Have you not covered something in that thought process that we've already gone through? That's a good place to kind of circle back and make sure you've got everything in place. And additional questions that I really value a lot are things such as, why should the listener tune in? What can they get from the podcast? Do you provide any resources that you think would be of value to them that can come in handy with the call to action? So it's kind of, just more holistic overview of your listener, their needs, their wants, how you are going to meet those. I really like it when people really take it into lengths and even think of a potential avatar person who is going to be listening to the show. Some people say, oh, it's an overkill or whatever, you can't always predict things, but I like it because at least in your head, you have put it together as to who you would like to talk to. So, and sometimes it's difficult to do it at the start because you just want to get started and you don't quite know who's going to listen. And it may surprise you entirely. So with all of that, the main thing is don't overcomplicate it, but try to be as specific as you can when thinking of all of those answers. And that will help you hugely in writing a really good intro script, really good outro script, and some good feature jingles too. So I've given you a lot of information about the questions I usually ask that help me with creation of the branding concept. But when you answer all those questions, obviously the next step is for you to get writing. With regards to the tips as to, how to best write that great sounding intro, I would say keep it relatively short if you can and to the point. It's very easy to include long lists of things that you can hear and, all of that. It can be too much. So treat words with caution, add them carefully into the concept and put a few different ideas together. So instead of just writing one script, why not write 3? So I usually write at least 3 scripts for my clients. And then it's good to kind of have a look yourself, but also if you have other people within your business or, within your circle, you can share those with, get a second opinion. Even better if you have, some friends who may be your potential listener, ask them their opinion and see what they come back with. And you kind of can build on from there. So two extra things that I'm going to cover here. So one is the segment jingles. Segment jingles are great if you want to jump on to the next topic. without feeling like you kind of have to say something in between. So you will see when I finish talking about that, I could really use a good feature jingle or segment jingle, because I'm going to talk about something else. So it would allow me to very easily transition into the next thing. And that's essentially what good feature jingles can do. They don't have to represent a segment if you haven't got one. They could be as simple as just your website address, your podcast name, something like you are listening to the Audio Unicorn, that kind of stuff. So it can be relatively generic. And even if you don't want it to have words, it could be a 3 to 5 second music transition with absolutely no words. It's just kind of that point to break and move on. And lastly, the outro. That is the place to include a call to action. Please do not put call to action in your intro. It is definitely not a place for it. You want it in the outro. And if you can, I would say make sure that if you put the links, they link to your own website, so you can track the effectiveness of those links in your outro. As if you send somebody to a Facebook group, you can't really see how many people went to it. So you can always create a short link, such as, audiounicorn.com/review, or, things like that. We use short links here at Music Radio Creative. It could be mrc.fm/learn or mrc.fm/presets and things like that. So create short links, and you can redirect. So it could be a short link that does lead to Facebook, but at least you can see how many people went through it. So very good to have that there. Now, here is the point where really that jingle could come in, because I would like to transition to the next thing. You see, they really come in handy. So next thing, Audio Unicorn update. I have a new microphone. Look at this. New microphone is nicely in place, and I am slowly getting used to it. It takes time to get used to a new microphone. And I think it takes time to get used to the new sound in general. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, the huge mess the studio was in for a very long time is over, and things are finally the way they're going to be for some time. So I'm hoping no more boxes arriving, no more parcels to unpack, and no more things to plug in on my desk. So I'm hoping this is it, and I'm very happy with the Notepad 5 that I spoke about yesterday as well. It's fully plugged in, it's here, it's there, and it is easy for me to use. So that's what really, really I value and appreciate. Other than that, I am very busy with all the things that I've mentioned already. So doing plenty of audio branding cases, and hopefully getting time for some production. So I'm having fingers crossed for today. We'll see how that goes as my Audio Unicorn journey continues. Thank you for watching.